Hi, everybody. Yes, don't get me to say what the ASCME trial stands for. I'd have to look at my notes. There is a lot of intentionality, though, in having that be the acronym from that really long, because we did involve people with lived and living experience at every stage of the research and the implementation and the monitoring of the program. So it really is about ask me rather than tell them. So I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement from where I do my work from. In Fredericton, we're in the unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, the Mi'kmaq, and the Passamaquoddy. And Elder Chris Brooks from Sitansisk, I was really happy to see him here last night welcoming us all. I think it's really important as we do land acknowledgements to recognize that the disproportionate effect of socioeconomic barriers as well as colonization and criminalization of poverty and people who use substances does affect people who are Indigenous and have been on this land for a long time. So we really have to double down our efforts and continue to move together with love. So I'm going to belabor my disclosure slides slightly. Often I see docs click by them really fast, but I do want to be really transparent and intentional about this. I am co-owner of a pharmacy, which I never thought I would be, but it is a social enterprise pharmacy. At Riverstone, part of what we do is we run an injectable opioid agonist therapy program. So I prescribe medications for people to inject liquid hydromorphone in the clinic, as well as providing oral options for people and stimulant replacement therapy. But I knew that the pharmacy-led model, a lot of money goes towards billing, and pharmacies tend to be quite lucrative. So we thought, well, let's cash in on that. So we do, and then all of the money for one of our IOT programs in St. John, New Brunswick, is run by the pharmacy income. So I don't actually get any money from it, but we're just using it to reinvest back in people. But I still think it's important because the realm of helping people who inject drugs is very precarious nationally. We fortunately just brought in a Liberal government in New Brunswick. I don't know if you heard us screaming in jubilation when it happened. But part of it is just to try to create a much better atmosphere. And I have a trans kid and another queer kid, so my God, am I friggin' happy anyway. I'm also queer myself, so there we go. It's love for everybody. The second intentionality, and I give a nod to Duncan in the back, who is one of my mentors, and he had a rob from the rich and give to the poor analogy around this kind of thing, which I like. We have a rapid access program for eliminating hepatitis C through Riverstone, and it's nurse-led. And our amazing nurse practitioner has taken us from nine visits for people to get hep C treated in general down to 2. And our individual cohort in our area, we've actually reached the WHO eradication guidelines for our immediate, thank you. Very proud. And so Gilead and AbbVie are the main medication providers. So we do give talks about this, and I do get money for it, and all of it goes to send our nurses around the world. And we were just in Greece talking about this, so. All right, now I'm really nervous all of a sudden. Sorry, I feel like I'm shaking the podium. Don't mind me. I'll get through it. So these are the objectives. I'll let you read. But anyway, we'll cover kind of the whole breadth of at least the origins of how I started treating stimulant use disorder and what that's led to with the ASCME trial. So a couple of big slides. Again, these will be available. This is from 2020, and it's really just to highlight the economic cost. I just find, as much as everyone in this room would understand the human cost and the social equity cost around treating substance use disorder, we also have to think of the people that are in government levels. So in 2020, substance use of all types cost New Brunswick $1 billion, and I am biasing towards New Brunswick stats, sorry, Nova Scotia. But then if we look at the area in the top right of the square, you can see where I've made a circle. That's really around the first 2 bars, the red one and the brown one, show alcohol and tobacco. And then in the middle, it's looking at opioids, cocaine, and other stimulants. So it's about $212 million in 2020, the cost to New Brunswick. And New Brunswick's about, the whole population is the size of the suburb that I grew up in Toronto, where I was born. And that's the whole province that fits into that. So it really is a lot of money that's going into just all the unintentional and what could be basically reverted into more compassionate care for people. But tobacco and alcohol, which are venerated, and in many cases there's festivals that celebrate alcohol. Obviously you all know this, but just the amount of money that it costs is even a lot more. So the next few slides, I just wanted to give a context for the outcomes. This is from the substance-related harms in New Brunswick. Our coroner provides quarterly reports. And so it is on opioids, and now they've added stimulants routinely for assessment. So you can see last year, 2023, there were 133, and they say apparent substance toxicity deaths because it's still, I guess, you can't 100% always tell if that's what led to the immediate death, but it was very present in the manner and in the toxicology, et cetera. And so basically 30% were opioid related without stimulants, and 18 were stimulant without opioids, but 44% were both. And that's what we're really starting to see is just the combination is entering. And whether people know that or not, if they're having to access, in this case, usually a very unregulated and toxic drug poisoning crisis, you really can't tell what's in there. And so we're seeing people that are sure that they're using meth, but they actually pass out and they've had trank dope in their system, so it's quite a toxic overall system. This is just to show the trends. So again, from the same resource from the coroner's report. So the one I wanted to highlight was the golden line. And you can see it looks like all of a sudden, no, we've gotten somewhere good, it's gone downhill. This is only because that last little section is only the first quarter of 2024. So in fact, the golden line is the combination of stimulants and opioids together. So you can see that in many ways in New Brunswick, that's becoming the greater cause of death. And again, that down deflection is just for the first quarter. So we can see an overall general trend of increasing. And I'm anticipating, unfortunately, by the end of the year, it'll probably be continuing to point back up. Again, this is just looking at the overall increase in deaths, and then just looking again at that first quarter is that tiny little bar. So as much as it's like, yay, it's gone down, it's not actually gone down, that's just the first quarter. So the overall trend from 2020, you can see it slowly, it's bouncing. This is each quarter, the number of deaths related to stimulants in New Brunswick, but it's still continuing to go up, and that first quarter is roughly a quarter of the bar beside it. So I don't think it's going to start going down. Really just highlighting why we need to be impacting this area. Because a lot of the time, opioid use disorder and toxicity deaths is talked a lot more about than stimulant. This is just a spread by gender, and I found this is a really surprising signal, and I'm curious to see by the end of 2024 what it looks like. The green is showing people who are female, and the golden is more people who are male. There isn't any split between non-gender identification. But the female cohort were certainly more than 50% of the deaths in the first quarter of 2024. So we'll just see if there's something that's shifted, or is that just an anomaly? Again, because it is a relatively small number, but we're just looking overall signals. This is federal stats. We're still looking at New Brunswick. And again, the downward deflection's only because we're in the first quarter. This is around the rate per 100,000 people. So it's not only number of deaths, but what's that mean for the population rate overall? So 2018, you can see what the rate was. That's that first on the far left. The first quarter of 2024 has matched what the total for 2018 was in terms of the proportion of population. So it also just means more people in the population are dying as well as increased deaths. I guess that probably goes hand in hand, but important to just trend. So this also is just showing nationally, just to give a bit of a snapshot, and I do include a Nova Scotia slide next because I want you to feel included. But so this is the rate per 100,000 of people that have died. And again, that top right bar graph, again, that little, the smaller one is only, I'm a broken record now. It's the first quarter. But it's just showing that the crude rate is increasing, as we already kind of know that it is. But that shows you kind of the national landscape of stimulant-related deaths in Canada. So it's not necessarily everywhere. I believe the Northwest Territories, Nunavut is not, there's no recorded numbers at this point that we can compare, but essentially that gives you a national. So then if you look in Nova Scotia, so in terms of the crude rate per 100,000, and you look at your top right graph, your first quarter is almost caught up to last year. So this is probably something that Nova Scotia will have to take. I mean, you already are taking it seriously, but just to show you that was a bit alarming to see that the rate of death by stimulants is going up considerably this year. So now I just wanted to give a little bit of history. So in Fredericton, in 2017, whenever I started, as much as I could, a rapid access addiction medicine practice, I do work at the downtown clinic, and we have a group room. And basically, I would sit there Tuesdays from 4 to 6, and Fridays from 1 to 3 with another nurse, and we would do walk-in addiction medicine treatment. It was just walking off the street, we'll start you today. It just felt like such an incredible need, and Fredericton at that point had some people that were living outside, but it was certainly a much smaller rate than what we have currently. But it just seemed, I wanted to have rapid access. So we started to do that. And the nice thing was, because it was in a group of people who were using drugs, I was outnumbered. That was sort of on purpose, because I wanted to centralize the community, the group of people as the wisdom keepers, and me just being sort of a sidebar as a consultant to the room. So I got to be quite party to really honest conversations about what people were using and what was happening and what they were seeing in the local trends. And it was becoming really apparent that methamphetamine was becoming much more of a problem in Fredericton at that time. There were different areas of the Maritimes where it hadn't been an issue. Fredericton is unfortunately an early adopter of crystal meth. And so as we started to see that, plus we would have people that obviously had untreated ADHD. I mean, you can just feel the vibe sometimes. Sorry for all the people that do really rigorous diagnostic criteria for me. I ask them and then I watch as they're walking around the room, walking around unable to sit still. But then I just find out, what are you using instead? And they would start to use meth. And I was like, well, maybe I can do something to actually help intervene that, because just the risk of psychosis and the challenges people faced was quite heartbreaking. So a colleague and I just started to look through the literature, and there was a Cochrane review, and there were a few early sort of signals that using ADHD medications off-label might be a way to try and get in that ballpark. So this was about 6 years ago when we had started this. And just because of the funding models from the provincial coverage and the federal coverage for Indigenous people, we landed on dextroamphetamine, cheap as dirt, and people could pay for it out of pocket if they had to. It also has some nice dosing variables, so we could really help get people to a comfortable dose relatively quickly, and had no ceiling for coverage, which is kind of nice in New Brunswick at least. So I'm just sort of showing you what kind of stuff that I would do, that these are the sort of details of what I would end up prescribing. So definitely higher doses we would try to get to for people, but it was more to see a cessation of cravings and symptoms, trying to balance that with if they ever had a history of psychosis, and walking sometimes a fine line with some people, but from a very harm reduction point of view. We then were able to add long-acting methylphenidate, which at the time you had to go through special authorization to get it covered, but then that fortunately changed, I think, around the time that maybe it was becoming more generic, and so it was more affordable for the province to cover. So again, I can show you here is just the dosing intervals. It has a ceiling of coverage of 63 milligrams, so that just would really tap out how people could get to. But the nice thing is that the non-crushable form made it a lot easier for me to really comfortably give weekly dispensed doses, because I did treat it pretty much similar to opioid use disorder. Those of you who prescribe know we have some rigor around how much we'll dispense, but also wanting to give people as normal a life as possible and not be tied to a pharmacy. And a few people did say that they're like, Doc, don't be silly. I can crush and snort that if I want to. And I was like, okay, well, at least you're not supposed to be able to. So just trying, because it was so off-label. But again, it's a balance between people. I feel like returning to as normal a life as possible is a really helpful way to have people be engaged in treatment for longer that's more meaningful to them. Lisdexamphetamine, for those of you who are prescribing in the realm, has also come along as a prodrug. So basically, you have to take it by mouth and swallow it. Your liver has to digest it, and it snaps off a little chemical arm, and then it makes dextroamphetamine. So definitely for people in a sphere of concern around harm reduction approaches, really important to have this as one possible option, because I think for a lot of people, in order to ramp up the ability for prescribers to I obviously am comfortable doing kind of wild things. Other people might not be as comfortable. So to have Vyvanse is the brand name, or lisdexamphetamine, available that people could use, knowing you can only take it by mouth. And I mean, I'm sounding really prohibitive against people who use drugs for enjoyment, but at the same time, I'm also just in the sphere of trying to treat a use disorder that will governments hopefully be able to support. So again, it's a walking a fine line, but it is a new agent which is now covered under our provincial formulary. So really excited about that. Okay, I better get on to the trial. I only have a couple minutes left. This is a massively busy slide, but I received this from Didier Jutras-Aswad, who's the lead principal investigator. I wanted to have fidelity to the trial. But essentially, what it is we did have enhanced involvement of people with lived and living experience. Again, that's how we got to the ASCME. So we're going to have, there's 5 sites across Canada. There's in BC, in Calgary, in Montreal, Toronto, and then us in Fredericton that are the 5 sites. Each location will have 88 people over a 3-year period of time who will be enrolled. It's a 4-arm open label for the contingency management piece, but otherwise double-blinded randomized controlled trial. So it's quite rigorous in that way. It's the largest one to date on the planet in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So very excited about that. And basically, it's identifying first if people are candidates, if they actually want to stop or reduce their use of stimulants, and specific to crystal methamphetamine or methamphetamine in its different forms. So it's not cocaine or other types of stimulants, but once people get enrolled, they are assigned to one of the 4 arms. So there's treatment as usual, which in our case in Fredericton is a seeking safety group, which some of you may have heard of that as well. But it's basically for PTSD and substance use disorder. So it's a very kind of gentle group space for learning to build safety and greater coping skills. And then the other is to either have placebo or to have the actual medication. And in this case, we go up to 250 milligrams. So again, for those of you who prescribe, that's quite a high dose, but the hope is to see if we can actually go, because some of the signals in early literature said promising outcomes, but the doses are probably not high enough. So in this case, we are going up a lot higher. We do have ECG requirements and things along those lines to create safety during it. And if people are too stimulated by it, they can go down. So there's always that option. And then we just monitor how they're doing weekly. And then also just look at their overall. There's going to be a lot more outcomes, and urine negatives is not the outcome we're looking for. It's certainly one of the markers that we're doing, but it's self-reported reduction of use and increased in quality of life. So I think that's just showing a little bit more of the specific protocol itself. And I'm just going to, okay, there we go. That's it. I can go back to the protocol if there's any questions, but thank you so much, Willie Wynn. Merci.
All right, thank you, Dr. Davidson. Questions? Any questions? We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, I'll go back here 1 sec. Get my steps in.
Comment more than anything else. I was interviewing a methadone prescriber from Ontario a couple of years ago, shortly after Vyvanse had hit the market, and in my understanding, Vyvanse interacts with the blood in the body, in order to produce its effects. And, there's all kinds of, like lots of drugs with abuse or with abuse potential. There's lots of safety measures built into it, etc. But this bloke went on to tell me that in London, Ontario, where he was practicing, that folks had found a way around that. And they called it a quote-unquote strawberry milkshake. And so this involves withdrawing some of your own blood into a syringe, cooking up the Vyvanse, and drawing up the blood, or Vyvanse with the blood, shaking it up, and then whacking it back into yourself, if that makes any sense. So, where there's a will, there's a way. I guess I just want to point out.
100%. I've never heard of that one, but well, yeah, I'll look into that for sure. I think that this still shows how we're operating, medicalizing often what is more of a moral or considered a criminal behavior. Like, I'm really uncomfortable with the criminalization of people who use drugs and sort of keeping people in such precarious situations that they have to do workarounds like that. In my world, I would love to see where we can get to a place of legalization and regulation of all substances. In a way so people have choice and that they can be safe and don't have to do things like try to inject strawberry milkshake. Thanks, though. I appreciate the insight.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Tommy.
Hello. I'm Tommy. I'm a doctor and researcher here in Halifax and Sarah's friend and colleague. I first just want to say how amazing and badass I think it is that a community program clinic like yours is doing a multi-center randomized control trial. It's incredible.
Thank you.
So kudos. My question is about treatment as usual in your setting, which might be different than treatment as usual in like a research institute in Toronto or Montreal, where you guys, it seems like we're already doing stimulant replacement prescribing. So are there people who are potentially eligible for this trial who might get randomized to placebo, but you would have otherwise previously prescribed them Dexedrine or Ritalin? And how do you guys navigate that, or what does that look like on the ground?
Yeah, it's a great question. We had, one of the criteria is they cannot have been on any kind of any of the drugs that are considered for stimulant replacement therapy. We have sort of a no-go list for at least 4 weeks before. So it doesn't preclude them forever. It just means they can't currently be on one. We're not really encouraging anyone to go off their current treatment medication. That just sort of, we basically tell people you can't really take part in the trial at this point. It's an interesting navigation because unfortunately people are also seeing that they're paid for their study visits. So there's a financial incentive, unfortunately, for people living outside who are on treatment to go off. But I'm like, no, please don't, because we don't want to confound the results. So yeah, we're having to kind of navigate that. But in general, as long as people haven't been on an investigational product or any related medication for the 4 weeks, they can join. For treatment as usual, we really didn't have as formalized a seeking safety group. We had group settings where people could voluntarily come. In this case, our contingency management is that they attend the group. So basically their contingency management, for those of you, is basically when you incentivize people to do something that would be good for them, or what you want them to do. So in our case, people, if they're randomized to the contingency management arm, they will, every time they go to the treatment as usual seeking safety group, they get a financial incentive back. And that does increase the more they attend. We're really trying to look at, because it's considered the only treatment right now that's gold standard for stimulant use, is that we pay people to engage in something or pay them to have negative urines. So I think we're really trying to see, does that actually work? Not the urines, we're not paying people for negative urines, because that's not a desired outcome only. It's really to engage in care.
Great, thank you. We have to sort of pause here for questions, but again, we can talk during the breaks and during lunch, and also you can maybe double up and fill out your bingo cards as well. So thank you, Dr. Davidson, for that great talk.